All right. So we were learning yesterday that sometimes the proxy, as soon as he receives the payment for a debt, he acquires the object, the cash, on behalf of the creditor. So in this halacha, we saw that that's only true if it's the payment of a debt. But if it's the gifting of a gift, then just by giving it to the proxy, that does not automatically make the proxy acquire it on behalf of the recipient. There has to be a much more explicit language in order for that gift to be irrevocable once it's gotten into the hands of the proxy. So that's what we were learning yesterday. And we'll just start in the middle of the Imrei Yaakov. Kuf mem hey, aval b'matana. But when it comes to a gift, we'll do kuf mem dalid. Shekeven shechayav, he says, when it comes to a debt, since there's a pre-existing liability and sort of financial connection between the debtor and the creditor, the debtor's giving over the cash to the proxy automatically makes it as if he's completely removed himself from the money. He says that's where we say that the money, as soon as it gets into the hands of the proxy, it belongs to the creditor. He says because of that connection that already exists, it's very easy for the proxy Levi to acquire it. But in a situation where there's no previous financial strings connecting the gifter and the recipient, right? Because this is a brand new gift. It's not predicated on any prior financial connection between the two of them. That's why you need a superior language that's more explicit in order to make this an irrevocable gift. And therefore, by just telling him, please transport this to Ploni, Shimon says to Levi, please transport this cash to Ruvain, that's not enough to make it as that as soon as Levi takes possession of the cash, it belongs to Ruvain. There has to be an explicit language of, please make a kinyan such that as soon as you take this cash, you have acquired it on behalf of Ruvain. Aval b'matana, but when it comes, so therefore that's why a gift requires more explicit language. Afilu im hamakabel aso shiliach sheyakabel avuro hamatana. And this was, I think, Mordechai's question yesterday, that even if the recipient is the one who sends the proxy. So Shimon calls up Reuven and he says to him, my good friend, I have something special for you that I just brought for you from Eretz Yisrael. I want to give it to you. Can you send over your son to have him come pick it up? So Reuven sends over his son Levi to come pick up the gift. Nonetheless, even if it's Reuven's proxy, if Shimon gives it to him and just says, bring this to your father, bring this to Reuven, right? And he doesn't say, acquire this on behalf of your father, so then it doesn't work. The Lashon Holech Da'amar Hanosei, Vitel Shlichusa Dehamakabel. He says, because Reuven appointed this guy as his proxy, the fact is he's doing the proxyship of Shimon, the gifter, not the recipient. Because the fact that, he's taking the gift and Shimon tells him, take this to your father, he's now actually the shaliach of the gifter, not the shaliach of his father. And therefore, it is within the purview of the gifter to say, wait a minute, come back here, kid. I made a mistake. Give me that back. I gave your father the more expensive gift. I meant to give him the less expensive gift or whatever, whatever his excuse is. Okay, kasvu aposkim, jehu hadin Im nasan l'shlucha shtar matana o shum shtar sheyitnenu leploni dedino kematana. He says on the poskim, right, that this is true, even if you include a note or you give written instructions to the proxy, basically telling him, give this to so and so. It's still called a gift. Dim omer b'lashon zachei az zachaba. It's only if in the written instructions it says, acquire this on behalf of the recipient, that it becomes irrevocable. Avalim omer lo b'lashon holech. But if you tell it to him in a language of just transport this and bring this to so and so, lo zacha v'yachol lachzor bo, then the proxy has not acquired it. It's not an irrevocable action, and therefore the gifter has the right to revoke the gift. So, but that's only when it's a gift that through the shtar, the sort of like, let's say it's a piece of real estate, and I say, bring this document, this bill, this, what is it called, a deed, right? Bring this deed to your father. I'm gifting him a piece of real estate. Shakasuf b'shtar sadi nasun lach b'matana du shtar mikna, where the document itself is a document of gift, or which demonstrating that it's owned now by the recipient. Aval b'shtar raya dahanu shekvar kana hasada b'kinyan suder. But if it's just a receipt that is basically for the purpose of demonstrating or verifying that an acquisition had already transpired, some poskim say that in that situation, once I've given it over to the proxy, he doesn't have a right to relinquish it, even if the gifter says, give it back to me. For this, that's a little bit more of a complicated halacha. We're not going to spend any time with that. And therefore, the final thing is that with a gift, if I just say, take this to Ploni, that's not irrevocable. The only thing is that there is an issue of mechusar amana. Like if I told Ruvain, I'm sending you a gift, and then I decide to revoke it, and I tell the shaliach, give it back to me. So I'm called a mechusar amana. I'm called acting in poor faith. And that's true even if the guy doesn't need it for tzedakah. But if I gave my word that I'm going to be giving him something, and then I revoke it and I don't follow up on my word, that we discussed at the very beginning of Hilchos Choshen Mishpat, and all the way back in Siman Aleph, where a person who's a mechusar, you don't want to ever be called a mechusar amana. You want to be a person of your word. And unfortunately, that stigma, that label of mechusar amana, carries with it certain consequences, not major consequences, but definitely you don't want to ever fall into that category of a person who doesn't hold to his word. Yeah. Yeah, it's a very good question. We learned, I think, last week that in either situation, if it's a debt, or if it's just a gift, in either situation, the shaliach is simply a shomer. He's responsible for negligent acts, but he's not responsible for theft or loss. Right. And it's therefore the payment of the debt is not, the onus of the payment of the debt is still on the debtor until it actually gets into the hands of the creditor. So even though the shaliach may have acquired it on behalf of the creditor, the debtor does not have a right to say, oh, well, I've done my job, I've paid back the debt. It has to actually get into the hands of the creditor in order for that debt to be canceled. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Now, we filled in up until now all the stuff that we had planned to do before we started the laws of Pruzbul. The remainder of Siman Yud Beis, the laws of loans, deals with the halachas of Pruzbul. We just scratched the surface of Pruzbul, but because we just passed Prus Bowl season, I mentioned yesterday that we're going to be skipping the remainder of these halachos, and God willing, when we need them in 7 years from now or 6.5 years from now, we will, Bezrat Hashem, we will come back to it, or we'll all be in Eretz Yisrael by that time, and we'll deal with it there. So I'm just scrolling through, and as you can see from looking at these halachos, oh, Mordechai, we just discussed your scenario where the creditor, where the recipient of the gift sends the shaliach. Either way, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, right? It's because once the gifter, the person giving the gift, tells the guy, take this to Ruvain, the guy becomes the shaliach of the gifter, not the shaliach of the recipient. So as I'm scrolling through, as you can see, all of the remaining halachos in the siman are dealing with Prus Bowl and Shemitah. And so that really is going to lead us. That's why I sent out last night the latest packet, our 17th packet. So if you don't mind just bringing that up, bring it up as well. Bless you. And we'll just do the very last two seifim in Sif Yudbeis. It starts in packet 16. Let's see, does it start Shintes? And then where does Shintes? And this is, oh, here we go. Sorry. Okay, we'll do Sif Lamed Tes, which is in in our new packet. Hamal ve'es chaveru. If you lend someone money, the kavalos man achar shvias eino misham tasa. So this is just a vestigial halacha that I wanted to clarify, and I got this shaila a lot. You lend someone money before Shemitah, and the maturity of the loan does not arrive until after the Shemitah year is over. You don't owe the guy the money until January of this coming year of 2023, right? I was going to say 19, what's going on in my head, until 2023, right? So Shemitah does not cancel that debt. You don't have to write a Prus Bowl for any debt that has not yet matured. Prus Bowl has to be only written in order to mitigate loans that have already become due. But if the loan hasn't become due yet, you don't need a Prus Bowl for that. No one can tell you when you go to him in January 2023, say, we agree that you're going to pay me back starting January 1st. The guy says, but you and I are both from, and you know that Shemitah canceled the debts. You say, what are you talking about? Shemitah only cancels debts that become due while it's still Shemitah, at the end of the Shemitah year. But this loan didn't become due until January 1st. So Shemitah has nothing to do with this outstanding loan. She'enani koribo lo yigos bashvias, hol v'lo higia adayim. He says, because the whole issue of the cancellation of debts is only when you can pressure the debtor to pay it back. But if you cannot yet pressure the debtor to pay it back during the Shemitah year, then Shemitah does not cancel that debt. Okay, so since it hasn't matured yet, I can't pressure you to pay me back, and therefore it has nothing to do with the halacha of the Torah of cancellation of Shemitah's Ksafim. Lefichach ein shvius mishametes hakafas hachanus, and therefore Shemitah never cancels store credit. Like if you have a revolving line of credit at a store, because you're constantly making purchases, then he says, because since you have a running tab and the storekeeper typically allows you to defer payment for sometimes a year or even 2 years, like what they call that, the layaway. Do you have layaway plans here also? I don't know. Yeah, right. So, or any other kind of tab that you can run with a supplier, manufacturer, whoever you're buying from, since he extends you credit to pay it back after Erev Rosh Hashanah, 5782, it's not canceled through Shemitah. Ve'ein darko likos miyad. And it's the extender of credit doesn't generally pressure you to pay it back at a certain specific time where that it arrives before the end of Shemitah in most cases. And therefore it's tantamount in all situations where you have a revolving line of credit where there's no drop dead deadline, then Shemitah does not cancel. But when you purchase merchandise on credit, it's not that you have a running tab with a particular company or a particular store. But let's say you purchase a one-time purchase on credit, you immediately become liable for payment. In other words, the seller really is expecting payment immediately. And if you say, is it okay if I pay you next week? And he says, yes, it's okay, then Shemitah could potentially cancel that loan. Because in theory, since there were never any terms that were established at the outset of the purchase, but basically the guy said, here's your merchandise, come back and pay me. You'll come back and pay me whenever you can or as soon as you can. So then that is something that is cancelable through the end of Shemitah. And similarly, let's say you ran up a significant tab at the local makolet, and finally the storekeeper said, look, Mr. Bernstein, it's already been 2 years, you haven't paid me anything. Here's your tab, here's what you owe. And he presents that to you. So then Shemitah will wipe that out if you don't do a principal, because he's already told you, this is what you have to pay, and I'm expecting payment. He says, since he tells you I expect payment ASAP, so then Shemitah will potentially cancel that. Some say that it becomes due immediately as soon as the storekeeper makes a calculation and adds up and tabulates the total of what you owe. That's when the loan has matured. In other words, what he's basically saying is that there's a certain level of gray here, of ambiguity, when a loan becomes mature in certain situations. Similarly, let's say a person is a laborer. He does work for an employer, and the employer has basically told him, I've got a bit of a cash flow issue, and it's going to take me some time to pay you back. Or he's a laborer who's not on his books as an employee, but as an independent contractor, and comes in and does work for him like a plumber or an electrician or whatever it is. And they have a running tab as far as what the laborer is entitled to get paid for. So in those situations, since there was never a hard deadline of when payment is due, Shemitah will not cancel that kind of debt that the receiver of services has to pay to the laborer. But once the laborer sends him a bill and says, payment is due, so then Shemitah will cancel that out.
That's something. You have a worker working for, I owe money to my workers. I don't think Shemitah could answer that.
Well, it's a debt. It's a debt.
It's a debt, but basically, they're not loaning me money. It's like I owe you money.
Is there no difference in saying, here's letting you $25,000? I know you're tight. Here, thank you. Or you have a business, you have workers, or you're buying schira.
It all depends. It all depends on the expectation of the people that I owe this money to. If their expectation that the payment is due immediately, so then that immediacy of in other words, then it's a debt that is due immediately. And so if I allow Shemitah to elapse without doing a prusbul, so then there could be this argument that Shemitah wipes it out. It doesn't have to be a loan according to what the Rav Shulchan Aruch is saying. As long as it's the generation of a debt, then Shemitah could potentially cancel it out. So it's not so clear in the poskim, but I just wanted to point that out. That's why it's appropriate to do a prusbul, even if you know you haven't loaned anyone money, because there could be situations where maybe you have a laborer that you haven't made full payment to, whatever it is. In all situations, you want to make sure, or right? You want to make sure you've extended service to somebody and they haven't fully paid you. You want to make sure that, but anyway, this is for Erev Rosh Hashanah. No. Yeah, didn't you do the prusbul, Erev Rosh Hashanah? Okay.